and welcome to another installment of If It's in the Mind, It Can Be Managed, the Mind Management Mentors podcast. To be fair, I'm a little bit excited about this podcast that we have coming up. We're going to be talking about a man's journey from suicide and depression in the armed forces all the way to the power of authenticity and identity, which I'm really passionate about that. So let's just dive straight in. And welcome to the podcast. Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
First off, thank you for having me here. I'm John Templeton, and to put simply, I'm a coach and author. But when we dive into the episode, I believe some of my insights and experiences shed a really unique light on what it means to be authentic, diving deep into psychology, theology, philosophy, putting those three pillars together, and sharing a unique perspective and a new paradigm for people to understand what it means to be authentic.
Ooh, some big words there, Mr. Templeton. First of all, I want to find out what theology is. What is theology?
Theo, etymology says Theo is God, essentially. So theology is the study of religion or God. So theology, the new word for theology would be spirituality.
Ah, there we go. Now that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I was in the right wheelhouse, to be fair. Would you? It's an important. If I don't know, I ask. That's the whole point of the podcast. Is look, we need to find out. I've met so many coaches in such a great way, and I try and take something away from the podcast myself that I'm like, right, that's something that I wasn't aware of. I'm passionate about authenticity. And even to the point where I say I feel like I'm holding back personally. And the true authenticity, I know I'm at about 85, 90%, but I know I'm still holding back. And one of the reasons why is I actually don't like triggering people. However, I know that we have to become that triggering person sometimes, or I feel that maybe a belief I have is that we have to move into that authenticity. It will trigger other people, but triggers are for other people, they're not for us. So we're going to talk about your journey from understanding theology, spirituality, and philosophy. What have you learned from philosophy that's helped you so much, John?
First thing I'll say is what you just said before, we can absolutely dive into that. I wrote about it on social media this morning, so happily dive
Brilliant.
into what it means to step into your power, which will trigger people. Um, Philosophy is a double-edged sword because with every perspective, there's an opposite perspective.
Yep.
So in philosophy, you get the dialectic, you get two opposing views, and it can be confusing because you wonder which perspective is quote unquote the right perspective or the more truthful perspective. And so philosophy is great because it gives you maybe a rule book, you could say, or some principles to live by, but you have to be mindful of who you're taking those principles from because different philosophers have a different life story, unique perspectives. So, double-edged sword, but the most empowering thing that I learned from philosophy, well, the word philosophy means the love of wisdom. So,
Mm.
those are two words I resonate with. Wisdom, I don't think I know, is really critical for us to be able to live a meaningful and fulfilling life. And love is a big part of my work. And it's probably different to what most people think love is. Um, which again, love can hurt, love can trigger, love can be brutal. So, yeah, philosophy really gave me some principles to start testing myself against to see which ones were going to support me in where I wanted to take my life.
Yeah. So there's a big journey for John Templeton. Now living in New Zealand. I knew you'd got an Australian accent, but living in New Zealand now because you moved away to go and write with your family and things like that. And I've been to New Zealand, stunning part of the world. Genuinely looks, the weather is very similar to Scotland, to be fair. It genuinely is. And I know we went around all the, because I used to work on cruise ships. So we travelled around all the what's the name of the places that we were going?
You would have gone to Mount Maunganui.
I cycled Mount Monanui.
Yeah, that's probably the I used to own two gyms there. It's a very beautiful part of the country. So you would have
Yeah.
gone to Mount Maunganui. I'm assuming you stopped in Auckland. That's just a guess.
Wellington and Auckland we went. We never went to Wellington. There'd been an earthquake in Wellington, so we did go. No, was it? Where was there an
Christchurch had
earthquake?
the earth. Christchurch
Christchurch.
had
We
the
never went to
earthquake.
Christchurch because there was an yeah. So we never went. Auckland, a fascinating place, beautiful place actually. I think we used to do a turnaround at Auckland. To be fair, yeah, beautiful part of the world. So, John, we want to, when it comes to the Mind Management Mentors podcast, we always want to deep dive. What's the journey of John to the coach and the person that wants to help others? Because coaching is about genuinely wanting to be that person to help others move forward in life. And coaching is so powerful, but there's always a learning process for us to be able to get into that coaching position. And that's where we go, that's where we head from the dark to the light. So we can't talk about the light until we talk about the dark. So John, share your story of the armed forces, the suicidal thoughts that you had, the heavy depression, and talk about that journey if that's okay.
Hmm. So I got kicked out of school, drugs, the usual, 16 years old, and I waited 12 months, joined the military. It was my escape, and it did. It saved me. It was a pathway out from a life that was pretty destructive. Military is fantastic. 7 years in the military, one 7 month tour to East Timor, and then I finished my career. So I was essentially a soldier. I loved it. Um, at the end of my career, I switched to physical training instructor. I topped my course and then got posted to train the New Zealand SAS. That was my last posting, the Special Forces camp as the physical trainer. Moved on, went into entrepreneurship, fantastic. Opened a few gyms, competed as an athlete, got a Guinness World Record. That was my athletic career. But, and then I moved into coaching. Okay. And at this the thing that drove me all the time, now I didn't know this at the time, but what drove me this entire time was I didn't feel good enough. And so every success I achieved, I was a very competitive person, had to win. But upon reflection, the reason I had to win was because deep inside me, I just didn't feel good enough. So that winning validated me. And whether that was in the military as an athlete, financially, I did quite well financially. All of it served to validate me. So I got into the coaching space. I grew really quickly. I started speaking alongside a lot of my mentors, Tony Robbins, John Demartini, Deepak Chopra. I shared stages with those people that I looked up to, but this is where it all started to come undone. I, after COVID, I had some live events that I was meant to be running, but I couldn't run them. I'd paid the money out, I couldn't get the money back, and I had to refund people. So I went from flying high to being ruined financially really quickly. Because a lot of my self-worth was tied to money, I then started to feel like my self-esteem dropped really low. And as the it's like a feedback loop, right? Your thoughts affect the way you feel affect your thoughts, and it's just this spiral that goes down. So my finances would drop. I would have low self-esteem. I would then fear and low self-esteem go hand in hand if I doubt myself. So then I wouldn't put myself out there. I would make less money. And it was this spiral that went down. And over the space of, I was depressed for probably 7 years. For the last 3 years was when I was contemplating suicide because when you're in pain, it seems to last forever. So Einstein has a quote. He's like, if you kiss a beautiful girl for 2 minutes, for 2 hours, it feels like 2 minutes. If you sit on a hot stove for 2 seconds, it feels like 2 hours. And that's how our perceptions dilate time. And so I was in pain, and although it was only 3 years, it felt like my entire life was that depression, was that pain. And so I had learnt to coach. So I had some coaching skills, but this is, I think, what you were just saying. As a coach, you learn that, well, you have to go into the darkness because that's where all the gold lies. If you really want to be integrated, you have to look at your own shadow. And I started to do that. So as my finances were dropping, as my self-worth was dropping, I was also looking for my weak points, looking at the aspects of myself that was didn't didn't believe in myself, felt insecure, felt unworthy, and living in that mental and emotional cocktail for that amount of time, it literally took over me. It took control of my mind. I had anxiety and panic attacks for months on end. I couldn't sleep at night. I was having nightmares, hot sweats. I sought help. I went to see therapists. Each time I saw a therapist and they couldn't help me. And the reason they couldn't help me is because they hadn't been through it. They knew stuff, well done, but they hadn't been through it. And when I realized that they hadn't been through it, I took a different approach. Um, there was one lady particular that said something to me, and I remember going, "What you're saying isn't it's not right. It's not true." And I tried to actually end my therapy sessions with her, my coaching sessions with her, and they were expensive, and she wouldn't give me a refund. And this is when I was out of money, and I went up into my bedroom, and I've got a chair where I would often meditate, and I sat in that chair, and I started meditating, and I reached a place inside myself where I came face to face with like my inner voice. And that was the first time in years, let's say 3 years of really dark depression, where I had a connection with my inner voice. And I could then discern what was me and what was other people's opinions, and what was
Mm.
me and what was just a thought pattern or emotion. And so after that moment, I had I had a reference point for John versus everything else. And then I started meditating a lot, hours and hours a day. And then one day I went, all right, I'm going to see how far I can take this meditation. And I sat down. I didn't have a plan to stop. I just said, I'm just going to go until I reach a state beyond normal consciousness. And I sat there and I meditated. I write about this all in my book. I won't go into too much detail, but after a few hours, everything went blank. Not falling asleep, not thinking stuff. It just went black and silent. And I've never heard the sound of silence, but I heard the sound of silence, and it was the most crystal clear, beautiful, abundant experience of my whole entire life. I came out of the meditation and I felt so different. My nervous system had calmed down. I had clarity. My mind wasn't foggy. I felt so grounded. And for about 2 weeks after that, it was like everything I touched turned to gold. And what I mean by that, it's not like I became rich. It's everything I did was infused with gratitude. Everything I did was infused with appreciation and presence. And that gave me a reference point for who I truly was. And it was after that meditation that everything really changed. That's when I started to research theology, spirituality, psychology, and philosophy because I wanted to understand my experience. Up until that point, I learned hypnotherapy, neuro-linguistic programming. So I had some tools, but it wasn't like a deep understanding of psychology or how the world works. And so it was me trying to figure out what I had experienced and a pathway for getting back to that experience. That's what drove my research and for me to write my book was the journey of uncovering a process or a pathway to experience that authentic state.
We've got a lot to pick. Now, now, John, now I know where the podcast is going to go. Thank you for sharing, John. Thank you very much. So, and this is a great topic of subject, a topic of conversation. When you're on the stages, you're not realizing that you're attaching your self-worth to being on the stages with Tony Robbins, Deepak Chopra. When you're on the stages, were you a coach before, or were you giving motivational speeches from from your time in the army. How did you get onto the stages with Deepak Chopra, Tony Robbins?
Yeah. The way I got connected to the people that ran the events was through, he's now a friend. His name's Joel Brown. Randomly, I was running just before COVID, I was running a retreat in Bali. I was in Bali when COVID hit, and for that retreat, I was looking for guest speakers. And there was this guy called Joel Brown, and I knew of him. I asked him if he wanted to help me facilitate this retreat. He said yes, but his fee was pretty astronomical. I am a coach at this stage. I'm coaching. It's not just motivational speaking. It's a
Yeah,
little bit
yeah.
of healing work, mindset, that stuff. COVID hits. Can't run the retreat. I get out of Bali back to Australia. Joel is stuck in Morocco running another retreat. We're communicating. I've never met him. He's like, because he lived in Bali, he's like, I'm not going back to Bali during this pandemic. I might come to Australia. Do you mind if I stay with you for a week or two until I sort my stuff out? And I said, like, for me, that was an amazing opportunity because I looked up to this guy. He had his podcast, he had interviewed Tony, Joe Dispenza, all of the greats. And I said, sure, come. He came to my house. Lockdown hit. We got locked down together for 6 months in Australia and the Gold Coast, and we had the time of our lives. We just got along so well, and he was well connected. So he said, "Hey, do you want to speak at this event?" I spoke at an event. I did quite well as an investor, so I was speaking about wealth, and I really did a fantastic job. And they asked me to keep coming back and speaking, and so they were online summits. But that was it. And then John Demartini. I don't know if you know Dr. John Demartini. He wrote the foreword for my book. Fantastic guy, but that's where I met him. And yeah, I spoke with Deepak twice, Robin Sharma as well. Um, that's how it unfolded.
Perfect. So, and the reason I wanted to find that is you'll have done some kind of work to understand, and I might be wrong, but to understand that when you're on the stages with these people, you've done something right. You've done some kind of work in professional development to understand about yourself why you are on that stage with people. And I know you said I didn't understand that my self-worth was attached to the money. So you've invested some money, but you understand, you'll have listened to some Tony Robbins stuff about how to be successful, how to be these kind of things. So my question is, and I think this is really going to blow this conversation up for you, is when you are sat there after you've done the Deepak Chopras, the online events, you have the tools, or I might be wrong, you have the tools to be that person that makes the change in the world. What's the conversation from the spiral? What's the conversation so that people can watch this and go, "Oh my God, that's where I was. That's where I am now." Is and how could you have certain tools? What was it about those tools that you weren't using for yourself to go, "We've been here before. I've done this." I always try and talk an awful lot about story, language, awareness, and physicality. We can change our emotional states. It's a really powerful tool for me. My conversations let me know where I am emotionally. The language I'm speaking is coming from a place of emotion. So I can recognize that internal conversation. You are there, the money's spiraling down. What the question I have for you, if you don't mind, is how did we not understand to use the tools that we were using, and why did it take you so long? Because it's not a problem that it took so long, but what was that journey? What was your internal conversation? What was your internal conversation, and why did we let it fester so long when supposedly we have the tools? Is that
Good
okay,
question.
John?
Yeah. Let's dive in for sure. So
Perfect.
the the only way in the foreword to my book, I write, if you haven't personally been through a spiritual awakening or an existential crisis or a dark night of the soul, some people have never even heard of a dark night of the soul, it might not be, it might not make sense, the emotional turmoil I was in. So that's a pre-frame that I set because people just might be like, well, this guy's retarded. What was he, what was he complaining about? Um, and so I think. the reason it was so bad was because at the same time all the bad stuff was happening, as I said earlier, I was also facing my shadow and my attachments. And it wasn't like I was trying to fix my situation. I was almost wanting it to break to pieces. If you, again, read any of the philosophy, it's like your pain, go into the pain, really, go into the pain. So I knew that if I tried to compensate, to try and do all the things I'd done in the past to be successful, I would just repeat a pattern, but it wouldn't actually fulfill me. So as I was talking on stages, there was something underneath going, this isn't meaningful to me. It's success, but it's not fulfilling. And so I didn't want to fix myself. I didn't want to use the tools. I'm doing bunny ears for anyone just listening because I knew if I had done what I had always done, I would just have kept repeating that pattern in the future. And sure, it was successful. It looked great on the surface, but my life, I couldn't bear the thought of living a life without the depth. And making money speaking on stages, it wasn't deep. And so yeah, I didn't want to. I didn't want to use what I knew. And to be honest, what I know now far supersedes anything I was ever taught as a coach. I would love to share some of it on the show because
Oh
I
yeah,
think it's profound.
yeah.
Um, but coming back to the emotions, it was like I was drunk. That's the only way I can sort of explain it, where lots of people would understand. Like when you're drunk, you don't make great choices. And that's how I felt. I was incoherent a lot of the time. As I was having anxiety and panic attacks, every de decision was made in survival mode. I lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in the space of a year, and that put my whole system into shock. I was essentially in
That's
shock.
yeah.
Um, that with the fact that my identity was attached to it was just an identity crisis. I couldn't afford to keep living. I was living in a like quite a beautiful big house on the water. Everything was the dream life. I had a gym in the house, a movie theater room. Couldn't afford it. And so for my identity, it's like a lot of people will say, well, first world problems. And I'll say this to anyone, it doesn't matter what someone's facing, like their problems are their problems. And it doesn't matter how small you might think they are or how big they are for that person. And so for me, losing, let's say $1 million in a year, like that destroyed me. It really fucking destroyed me. My whole identity. I felt like I was nothing. I felt like I was a worthless piece of shit. And I knew that if I just went back into old John mode, making money, I would have been unfulfilled because that what got me into that situation in the first place, again, would love to talk more about this, was pride. If I didn't have so much pride, I wouldn't have overestimated myself, overcommitted myself financially. And so it was actually my pride that was a double-edged sword. Yes, it got me successful, but it also was the catalyst for my downfall. Pride before the fall, as they
Pride's the
say.
tipping point, isn't it?
Yeah. So I didn't want to be that guy anymore. And so I let it all fall apart to get to the rubble and see what was left, the soul, the spirit.
And did any, I'm not saying you're friends with Deepak Chopra or Tony Robbins or anyone, but the friend that stayed with you for 6 months, he must have seen the downward spiral, yes or no?
No, because it
No, because that
happened
was
after he left.
right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
afterwards.
Did you at any point think, I know you said you went to see therapists. Did you think, oh, I'll reach out to that guy? Maybe he has the answer.
Yep, I reached, and I have lots of friends in the coaching space. And here's the pattern of behavior because what I did, I kept investing money, even though this is why I lost money so quickly. I was investing it, but because I was out of alignment and in survival mode, nothing was working. And so I would go to my friends and I would say, "Hey, I need some help." They would support me. But again, none of them had been through it. None of them
Mm.
knew what I was going through. So they had their opinion, but it was not relevant to my situation. And I learned through asking friends, reaching out, seeing therapists, I learned that I had to trust myself. That was it, period, full stop, because none of them had been through the experience I was experiencing. And so I'm grateful to them because they all tried. Some of them tried a lot. I sat with some friends for 6 hours, um, good coaches, and they gave me some insights and ideas, but they hadn't been through it, and so they couldn't even explain to me what I was experiencing. And when I share what I would like to share, maybe a little bit later, I think it will make sense because I know that to really be authentic, this has to happen to someone. They have to experience pain. Now, I'm not saying to the same degree, but a lot of the people I was seeing, they were relying on their knowledge and their intellect as opposed to tapping into a deeper part of themselves, you could say, which I don't think many humans get to. I don't think many humans really get to experience true authenticity and inspiration in their lives. And I, and so talking to these people, all they were doing is, again, I mention in my book, people will only understand you from their perspective.
Yeah.
And so I was just getting all these different people's perspectives, very, very grateful. But true authenticity is it's almost the opposite. It's like everyone else's perspective is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is that inner voice, what's happening inside. So I believe that the physical world is just a classroom. It's our classroom for our own psychological and spiritual development. So all the feedback we get is just us learning how to be ourselves. I think we're here on earth. I think our true purpose is to be authentic. We're here to learn how to love ourselves enough to be ourselves. And it's yes, we use the outside world like a mirror, like a reflection, but it's up to us to figure it out inside and have the courage to make the changes.
The I probably have touched on this an awful lot, but there's a really powerful book, and I always think everyone, and I'm sure you've read it, and we can just slightly touch on that, and then we'll talk about the other things you want to talk about. Is Power versus Force by Stephen Peters? No,
David Hawkins.
David Hawkins.
I've got it down on
Power
the ground here.
versus Force, and for anyone, it gives you a full understanding of the emotional states and consciousness. And pride is the tipping point. Pride and courage are right at the side of each other. That pride's always comes before, they always say it comes before a big fall. And courage and gratitude is really high vibrational states for people. It moves us away from depression, the blame, and the darkness that we have and sit with, and it brings us up to this whole new light. But authenticity is the highest vibrational state. It's actually higher than gratitude, and a lot of people always miss that. They say no, gratitude is the highest vibrational state. Actually, authenticity is a higher vibrational state, and I think one of the best persons I could possibly say for an example of that is Gary Vee. And I'm sure you've seen some of the Gary Vee stuff. That gentleman is completely 100% authentic. There's nothing about him that I would see from my perception and my understanding is that's why he's where he is. The Gary Vees of the world is the authenticity. There's always something within myself and a perspective of see other people of this Tony Robbins. I've always kind of liked, but I've always seen the other side to it. And then there's Dean, the other guy, the little fella.
Graziosi.
That's the one. And that is never vibed me. It's never vibrated. I don't know. There's something about him that I don't think is anyway true. But that's a me thing. That's a me problem. That's a my perspective thing. But that's how we show up in the world. So the 7 years of depression that you had, until you connect with that inner voice, do you feel that there was always that little part of you going, I know I need to go through this. I know I need to go through. I'm shedding the layers like the onion. I'm shedding the layers until I get down to the core of the onion. Do you think looking back now, because it is true, I think you'll certainly agree, is that the bad times made us stronger. We don't feel it in the moment. We don't see it. We certainly don't hear it. But if we hadn't had that cataclysmic fall, we wouldn't be able to be the people that we need to be to understand that, right?
I would even go one step, I agree, and I would go one step further and say that the bad time and the good time are the same thing.
Love it. Love it.
If you tell what was the let's play a scenario here. What's one of the greatest memories you have? One of the best times of your life?
One of the best times of my life is, apart from watching the Superman movie yesterday, which was absolutely amazing, by the way. John, if you've not seen Superman, please go and watch it. Um, Meeting my wife. It's always meeting my wife. There'll always
Great.
be stories around my wife. Yeah.
Okay, so let's play a game. Just the first thing that comes to your mind. It's all you got to
Yes.
do.
Yes.
What led you to the moment where you met your wife?
She was a guest in the hotel I was working.
Okay, what led you to that moment in the hotel when you were working and she was a guest?
Oh, I saw her sat on the side of the dance floor in a green long skirt and a girdle thing, not a girdle thingy, but the things that ladies wear around here with push-ups. It wasn't like boobs weren't popping out. But I
It's
just
called a
remember I was like,
corset, I think.
what's he called?
Corset, I think.
I think something like that. Yeah, I remember her tall, very pale. I do have a thing for redheads and light skin. And I just remember saying, "Go, wow, what a stunner, absolute stunner." Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to keep asking the same question. What led you to that point? What led you to that moment?
Oh, I don't know.
Yes, you do. Something led you there. What put you in that place?
Well, I wanted to work abroad.
Great. What made you want to work abroad?
Oh, I wanted to experience something different in life. I didn't want to be stuck. I was very conscious at a young age that people sit in the same corner of the pub talking about the same stories and don't change. And I didn't want that for my life.
Great. Can you see how that negative situation of sitting stuck in a pub
Whoa.
and meeting your wife, the positive and the negative are actually two sides of the same experience?
Well, hello, John Templeton. That's very, very.
So it works both ways. It works both ways, positive and negative. And this is a big part of my work around authenticity is understanding that you as a being have strengths and weaknesses, and you can't be authentic until you can admit both your strengths and your flaws. And so the same with all of our experiences in life. I've got a quote from the again in the book, which is no therapy is complete until negative and positive are equal. So until we can see that those painful times were a blessing, that's
Mm,
when the therapy is complete. When we can
yeah,
see that the pain and the pleasure are actually they're the same experience, and we physically, scientifically cannot experience one without the other. So yeah, those dark times they're not, it's not like they're necessary. They are absolutely necessary because they're actually the same thing.
yes, I love that. That's the beautiful of reframing and looking at back at of how we can turn every. I don't know if I learned that from NLP, but every negative has a positive. Every negative has a positive. It's the most annoyingly frustrating thing that I have as the code of ethics for Cuddy is that every negative has a positive. We just have to find it, right? Which is exactly what you did. And finding my wife, there was a negative that got me to the positive. Boom! I love that. I think that's absolutely fantastic, John. Were you aware of that when you were incoherent for 7 years, though?
Mm-mm. No, that I learned through studying philosophy, universal principles, universal law. That is when that's where the most clarity came because then everything had a reason because there's no effect without a cause. And so when
Yeah.
we understand the cause, we understand the effect. And a big part of so the answer is no, I had no idea. And even realizing that it was my pride that led to my depression, it was my success. If I hadn't been successful, so you said that every negative has a positive, but every positive also has a negative. And so all of my success, I had to go back and look at, well, where was the what was the downside of my success? And it was the most liberating experience going, all of my past successes were actually what led to my downfall. Like to me, that was a beautiful realization that if we label things positive and we become proud, we've got all these achievements, all that does is expand our ego, but it doesn't actually, it takes us away from who we truly are. So if our mind is in the past, positively or negatively, those are bad events, those are good events, we're going to recreate the same future. It's just our painful experiences from the past are going to create fear in the future, and our pleasurable experiences in the past are going to create excitement. So it's pain in the past drives fear, positive pleasure in the past drives excitement, and those are our value systems, and that drives us. But we're never present. We're never grounded. We're never true. We're never authentic because all we're doing is recreating the future in the past. And so until we can balance those perceptions of a positive or a negative past, we're always going to be trapped by our memory and imagination driving us towards fantasies and nightmares. Yeah, happy to dive into it more, the mechanics of it, but realizing that also positive, I'm not a positive thinker, I'll be the first to say it, and
Yeah, me
most
neither.
people,
Yeah, me
right?
neither. Yeah.
It's optimism is detrimental at times, and pessimism is detrimental at times. It's knowing that we need to be positive during negative times and be more negative during positive times. That's what keeps us grounded.
Yeah, I love it. That's exact. So I'm a big. I do try and help people to understand meaning is the meaning that we create to everything that's happened to us in this moment. And the second we remove meaning, we kind of create a level. Somebody said, "Cuddy, you're so positive." I said, I'm actually probably one of the least positive people you let. I've got very low expectations for people, but I've got high expectations of myself. Again, there's a light and a dark with every part of that, and I get that. And someone was like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Just if I've got no expectations of anyone around me, I'm not really going to get disappointed." And that little seed and that little light moment for someone was like, "Oh shit, my expectations of other people are too high." I said, "Yeah, and probably the expectations of yourself are too low." And we balanced that out. Fantastic. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing, John. And there's one thing I just want to touch on, and again, it's another book that I think everyone should read, and I know you'll have read it because you've talked about it. But it is when it comes to philosophy, one of my best deeper learnings from philosophy was The Courage to be Disliked by a Japanese author, Futa Kami something. Very. Have you read the book?
I haven't.
Oh, you are, John. You'll. This is exactly what we're talking about. The courage to be disliked. It's a story of a Japanese philosopher and a 16-year-old boy. And I didn't read the book. I listened to the audio book, and the audio book is these two voices going. And I listened to it on a bike ride, and I fell in love with that book. The Courage to be Disliked by Futa Kami, something like that. And it's this a pure book on philosophies of this 16-year-old challenging this philosopher the whole way through, and it's an amazing book for anyone to read. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about your book, John. So, John, let's deep dive that because I know you keep saying, "Oh, you want to share that," and I'm like, "Right, boom." What do you want to share, John? What do you want to talk about?
The centerpiece of the book is the map of emotion. And I know you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
David Hawkins' map of consciousness. Um, I took his work, I took all of my research from different people. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, for
Yeah,
example,
great.
which so I read all of his initial work. There's a book called I think it's called Personality and Motivation. I just wanted to read all of the root sources and I brought them all in and I created a framework, which is the map of emotion.
Mm.
Um, because when we can understand our emotions, if I knew what emotion someone was feeling, and you can sort of see it in them, especially if you're trained like yourself are, a bit of sensory
Hear it.
acuity, you can see it.
The language, yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you what their relationships are going to be like. I can tell you what their financial position is going to be like. I can tell you how they're going to do in business just by knowing what thoughts they're having and what emotions they're feeling. And so I created a map, and it was for me. It was for me. I had that meditation and I got to my center point. And authenticity sits in the center of the map of emotion. And then there are 8 emotions around the outside. And each emotion is simply a thought we're having. Anytime we feel a feeling, there's a thought corresponding. So by looking at the map of emotion, we can go, I'm thinking, if I'm having a positive thought about the future, I'm going to feel excited. If I'm having a negative thought about the future, I'm going to be fearful. These are just fear and excitement, the 2 emotions we feel when we're perceiving the future. And all of a sudden, I can tell you if that person's excited, what they're going to do, and how it's going to negatively impact them moving forward. Because excitement is a positive emotion, it's going to draw in a negative, there's going to be a negative to come with it. If someone's fearful, I can tell you what they're going to do in any context, financially, relationships, within their business, and what positives that will draw in with it. And so the map of emotion, it gave me a blueprint for understanding myself, and it gave me a roadmap for being more authentic. So fear and excitement are motivation. They're not inspiration. We're avoiding something negative, we're seeking something positive.
Mm.
Inspiration is when we're no longer looking for positivity in life. We're no longer looking to be happy. We're no longer trying to avoid sadness. We're doing something meaningful, something purposeful, something inspiring, and we're contributing to others. And so the whole book is about authenticity. And I lay out chapter by chapter. It's quite detailed, I'm not going to lie, but I wanted to go deep. And it lays out how to get back in your center and to look at your life and understand your perceptions, how they're driving your emotions, what you're then going to do out of that emotion. If you're angry, you're going to act very different to if you're inspired or grounded. If you're feeling pride or you've got pride inside you, you're going to act very different to a person who's feeling happy or elated. So, by understanding our emotions, where we are, that is the pathway to empowerment. And so, I don't want to talk about it too much unless you would love to hear it. I don't know, and we might not have enough time. But that's really the centerpiece of the book is the map of emotion, understanding because 99% of our thinking happens without us even knowing it. And I would
Yeah.
say 99% of people don't even know what they're thinking. And if they just put a timer on for 20 minutes and try to sit with their eyes closed, it will drive them absolutely bonkers because their mind will just be running off thinking about the future, what they have to do, an altercation at work, someone they don't like. It's our mind is like a monkey, for the use of a
The
better
monkey
word.
mind. Yes, I love the monkey
Right?
mind. It's chatter, chatter, chatter.
So if our mind's a monkey, that means our feelings are going to be all over the place. And that means our decisions, because we're going to make decisions based on our emotional state. And so our decisions lead to our destiny. So if you imagine our thoughts lead to our feelings lead to our actions, and our actions lead to the outcome in our life. If we're not in control of our thoughts, we're not in control of our life. And so the whole book is about breaking down that pattern, looking at our thoughts, our emotions with the map of emotion, the action we take, and the outcomes we're getting. And it's just through meditation, contemplation, facing the parts of ourselves that we don't want to, integrating them, that we can change our thinking, the way we feel, change our actions, and change the outcomes in our life. So that's it in a nutshell, but it goes deep, and maybe that's for another time.
I have a feeling there is a part two, John Templeton. And do you know what? The conversations that I'm having with everyone on the podcast at the moment, like, Cuddy, we need a part two. I'm like, we absolutely need a part two. John, I'm very much aware of the time difference with you and things. And thank you so much for getting in contact. There is definitely going to be a part two to this, John, because we've touched so much. I think it's really important for people to understand that depression is an emotional state.
It is, you know what it is? I'll tell you exactly what it is.
Perfect.
And some people will not want to believe this, but it's going to support you and empower you to know this. Depression is nothing more than a perception of loss of something we value. When we perceive our life to be missing something we value, if at first we'll be upset, maybe sad, But if our life continues to be missing that thing we value, we will become depressed. Men or masculine people will become angry. Inferior or more feminine people will become depressed. So both are the same mechanics. There's something we value that we don't have. We're either going to become angry and pissed off if we're more masculine and superior. We're going to become sad and depressed if we're more inferior or feminine. And so depression is just a perspective. With depression comes, there will be low self-worth with it. There'll be shame. So with anger and pride, they come together,
Yeah.
and depression and shame come together. So if someone has a bit more shame in their system, they don't feel enough, and then they're missing what they value. So they perceive their life should have something, and it's not there, over time that will become depression. And so the key to healing depression is to understand first what's the thing that's missing that you want, and then balance your expectations. Because
Mhm.
it's just an unmet expectation, like quite simply. I'm not sure what your beliefs are, but it's an emotion.
Totally right.
Happiness is an emotion. Depression is an emotion. It's nothing more than a thought that we're having about our life circumstances. You're happy when you get what you want. You're depressed when you don't get what you want. It is that simple. It doesn't need medication. It just needs awareness to what the hell is going on so that you can just balance your mind. And the depression it's a solved problem.
Yeah, I love it. John, this was fantastic. How do you feel about this?
I have enjoyed, I've enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed getting to know you, and I enjoy your energy.
Oh, thank you very much. You're very kind. John, I think this was absolutely an amazing start to a 2 or 3 part series on the Mind Management Mentors podcast, depending
Amazing.
on your time and availability. We are speaking the same language. We are 100% talking from the same chalice, if you like. I absolutely, I love that. There's so many key take. I've been writing down the key takeaways for this and stuff, and what we're going to call the actual podcast and things like that. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up, John?
Just keep just keep learning wherever you are, whatever you're doing, just keep learning. The more you learn, the better the quality of your life will become in the long run. So yeah, if you can just keep listening to podcasts like this, keep reading, keep surrounding yourself with good mentors, you will over time notice a profound difference in the areas of your life that you focus on.
Got a question. What if you're getting triggered by the people that know they can help you?
Can you put that in context? So
If
is this is this you? Is this
No, no. We talked about triggering earlier on in the podcast. If we can explain what triggers are to people, because trigger will come from a place of displaced negative emotion. It comes from resentment, it comes from judgment, it comes from
yeah.
pride. So the triggers come
Yep.
from these negative emotions. Is there any way that we can explain to somebody watching this podcast right now, your triggers are actually going to help you if you understand that the placement of the trigger is there to give you a lesson?
Absolutely. I said during this episode at some point that I believe the purpose of life is to learn how to love and appreciate and ourselves and others. And yeah, when we judge someone, when we get triggered, we're judging someone as negative. I put everything into positive and negative. There's something they're doing, an action or a behavior. So it could be a trait that they're displaying, a characteristic of their personality, and we're putting that in the basket of negative. We don't like that, bad, wrong. And so that's resentment. And then we're going to distance ourselves from that person, right? But for example, let me give you an example. If you judge someone for being um, wealthy or a salesman, and you're going to say, "Oh, that's horrible. I don't like that." What that does not allow you to become a wealthy salesman. And you might think, "Well, good, I don't want to be one." But then you'll probably go and buy a lottery ticket because you're poor, right?
Ah,
So, so integration and becoming whole, which is fulfillment. There's one pathway to fulfillment, which is self-fulfillment. It's not going to ever happen outside of yourself. It's going to happen through being integrated and whole within yourself. that means adaptable. So that means that if you need to be a salesperson, you can be a salesperson. If you need to be not a salesperson, whatever that looks like, someone who gives maybe more altruistically. So if you're giving altruistically, it's kind of the opposite to a salesman. Well, you can do that too. To be adaptable, to be flexible is the key. And so if you're judging someone as negative, really what you're doing is judging yourself. That's really what it is. And so it's an element of self-love. So instead of going, that behavior is negative, go, well, what is the benefit of that behavior? Or how could, if I displayed that behavior that I'm seeing in that person, if I displayed it, how could my life improve? So if I looked at the sleazy salesman and went, ah, if I did that, how could my life improve? And to do this, you have to be objective. Because if you look at it through a subjective bias, you're going to keep condemning it and judging it and resenting it. Whereas if you can be objective and go, well, what are the benefits to that? You're going to say, ah, I would have more money maybe. And if I had more money, then maybe I could um, give more money to charities if that's your thing. Or maybe you could, buy a luxury yacht, whatever floats your boat, pun intended.
Excuse the pun.
So it's about appreciating every trait within every person. And what you'll find by doing that is you get to be unique from it. And what I mean is that when we can appreciate other people for who they are, we're going to allow ourselves to be who we are. Until we can love and appreciate others, we will not be able to love and appreciate ourselves. So that outside world's just a mirror. And if we're being triggered, as you've said, that's an opportunity to actually love ourselves. As paradoxical as it seems, by appreciating that other person, you feel it. Not you particularly, but anyone who's listening, you feel it. Go and write down all of the benefits to the person's behavior that you're judging as negative, and you will feel your heart open a little bit. You'll feel a bit of gratitude and appreciation flow into your body because you're seeing that person through a different lens. It's unconditional love. When you can see a person as a whole person, that's unconditional love. And what you'll find is that you begin to feel more abundant and whole in those moments when you're no longer judging them.
Love it. And on that bombshell, thank you very much for being on the podcast. If there's ever a
It's my
case of
pleasure.
it's in the mind, it can be managed. I think this podcast is it. To be fair, I say that at the end of every podcast because if it's in the mind, it can be managed. I think we grow in the dark and think we search for the light as every seed does. And everything grows in the dark, and it's not until we reach the light we get to bloom. And it definitely sounds like you are blooming, Mr. John Templeton. Thank you. Thank you very much for being on the Mind Management Mentors podcast. As always, if you're liking the content, you're liking the podcast, like and subscribe. And we can't wait to see you on the next episode of the If It's in the Mind, It Can Be Managed, the Mind Management Mentors podcast. And as always, big love from Cuddy. That's how we always wrap up. Thank you so much, John. And we'll see you back for another time on the Mind Management Mentors podcast.